right, welcome YouTube friends. Just going to add the rest of the stream. One. All right, looks like we are all on. Welcome Sin, Mary, Rick, and Jayanta. Welcome Richard and Christina. We'll give it a minute or two for people to come on in, and then we'll get started. If you already have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Welcome Nico and Gita. Hello, Pasika Metika. Welcome. Welcome, Richard and Edward. So, our friends, we are here for a monk chat. So, this is the time to ask your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Welcome, Edward and Maria. Nico has a question. Do you have to do everything right to gain the state of nirvana? Eventually, yes. But until you get everything right, you keep doing everything wrong and get better at it. And then once you become awakened, you become one of the perfected ones. But until such time, you are trying to do it right. And you have to do it wrong a lot to learn how to do it right. That's what the Noble Eightfold Path is all about. Nico, with a second one right quick afterwards. Is gambling bad karma? I would say that I don't think it's bad karma in that, like, the same as like killing a being and things like that. But it's definitely not a skillful mind state to build, right? This kind of like, oh, I want to, gamble this money so I can get more, right? It's like can feed a very greedy mind state. And it can put you in situations where you become, such a gambler that you can lose your house and lose your money and all these kind of things, and put your family in a bad situation. So it's not really, in general, considered to be a wholesome, good, skillful thing. Richard has a question. What would be a good way to practice renunciation and the non-arising of unwholesome states? So you practice renunciation in whatever way that you can. Whether it's, donating some money or donating your time, right? Letting go of something, whether it's time, money, effort, energy. That's how you practice letting go. That's how you practice renunciation. You start in the small things, and as you go down the Noble Eightfold Path, then you're able to renounce greater things. But you have to renounce small things first. You have to practice renouncing and letting go of small things. The non-arising of unwholesome states. Well, let's look at that. Unwholesome states, not arising. So what does that mean? It means that we want to train our mind to act in skillful ways so that unskillful ways do not take control in our mind. Right? When unskillful habits and tendencies and thoughts that arise, we don't attach to them, don't accept them, don't say, oh, this is really nice, I'm going to think more about this. You recognize it for what it is. This is unskillful, and if I acted on this, it would lead to my harm and the harm of others. And then when you recognize that, most of the time you're able to let it go. And the more you do that, the less power those unwholesome states have. And each time they come back around, they're weaker and weaker and weaker, and they have less control. They have less power over you until eventually they're gone. They have no power. What is the best way to meditate on the deathless? I don't know how you meditate on Nibbana. I mean, I guess you could contemplate what, I don't know if you can even do that. Like you could contemplate the mind of a being who doesn't have greed, hatred, and delusion by contemplating your own greed, hatred, and delusion, and seeing if you are lessening your greed, hatred, and delusion along the path. As the Buddha says, that the definition of Nibbana, an awakened being, has abandoned greed, hatred, and delusion. Hello, Edward. Oh, wait, I already said hello to Edward. And all right. Nico has another one. How many realms of hell do Buddhists have and Buddhists go to? I think, if I'm not mistaken, Buddha mentions 7 in the suttas. But I think that these are not meant to be like exhaustive lists. How many hells are there in reality? I don't know. But I think 7 are mentioned in the suttas. Charles Lee has a question. ID, you talk about the 4 ways. Oh, okay. We view each of the 5 aggregates that lead to personality of self. So, yes, this is the question from this morning. So these 4 ways are different ways that that ascetics at the time saw some kind of a self. And the Buddha is saying all of these different ways to make it quite clear that there is not self, soullessness. So, regarding form as self, this form is myself. Or regarding self as form. And so that's a subtle difference, but it's a difference. So form as self, or self as form, or form as in the self, or self in the form. So what I would say is, I wouldn't get too worried about getting wrapped up in the wording on this. The idea is to investigate the 5 aggregates and try to really see if you see an atta in the 5 aggregates. some kind of permanent essence, permanent soul. Try to observe that. If you're looking at form, do you see a permanent soul there? Feeling, perception, mental formations or choices, modern translation, consciousness. Where is it? What individual part can you find this atta? Right? You observe that. Investigate the aggregates deeply. And the Buddha says that you'll see that all these aggregates are not me, not mine, and not myself. When seen rightly, when seen correctly. And watch the mind's slippery desire to find a self somewhere. Like that's what this is. Well, I mean, obviously form is not self, but what about self is form though? Well, obviously form is not in the self, but self is in the form. Right? So all these kind of sophistry is kind of trying to, like a slippery eel, trying to find a way to some kind of atta, to some kind of self. Ideally, when you're investigating the aggregates, when you're investigating anything, you're not using words. You're just like, okay, let me see now. Where is the form? Is there a self in the form? Is there a self in the perception? You're not. Well, you probably shouldn't do that. I mean, maybe some people do. I don't know. But the understanding of this is a deep experiential understanding. You can, sometimes people will teach to say something that's like, this form is not myself, form is not myself, form is not myself. And, that might be helpful, but it's not something that in the long run, in and of itself, will allow you to actually see that form is not yourself. Yeah, all right. Jay Kyle says, Bhante, do you believe you have ever met an Arahant? No. I mean, could I have? Sure. I'm not an Arahant, so I couldn't know if somebody was an Arahant anyway. But no, I don't. I mean, I could have. I don't know, but I don't have any like perception that, oh, I think this person is an Arahant. I've also never really cared to look. It's not something that I tried to do in my life. Oh, I have to scour the world to find somebody who's an Arahant. It's not really something that I worry about. But in terms of like, do I believe that I've ever met an Arahant? No, I don't think so. All right, Christina has a very, very, very complicated, detailed, and deep question that could probably be good for about a 2 or 3 hour lecture. But we're going to try to delve into this. Christina says, how does modern day Buddhism treat gender? I've read conflicting info that indicates sexism in treating women as inferior, e.g. the 8 Dhammas. Additional precepts required of bhikkhunis only. And then continuing on, I read women are not considered as complete entity in Buddhism. Their body is not considered fit to attain enlightenment and become Buddha. What are your thoughts? So attaining enlightenment and becoming Buddha are two different things. That's the important thing to understand. I think that this whole thing about women are not considered a complete entity, I've never heard of this. This maybe is something that some people say in the Vajrayana, maybe. I'm not sure. I have heard of some traditions that say that, women practitioners should practice to, become men in future life so that they can become awakened. That's not in the early texts. That's not something that is in those earlier texts. I don't know exactly where, because it's not something I've really encountered much of. So it's quite clear in the early text that the Buddha says that women can become awakened. That's not in dispute. And in the early text, you see hundreds and thousands of women who are awakened. Again, not in dispute. There are some lines in the early texts that appear to be misogynistic, and sometimes when you understand the deeper context, they're not as much. Sometimes people say that, scholars will say that this appears to be added later. It's not part of the earliest stratum. And sometimes it's just kind of like, whoa, okay, well, this does seem kind of messed up to modern standards. So it's, it's a very complicated thing. So one thing I will say, like the only thing in Mahayana and Vajrayana, they kind of speak of awakening and Buddhahood as the same thing. But there's a very clear distinction here in the early text that every Buddha is an Arahant, but not every Arahant is a Buddha. A Buddha is the one who brings the teachings, who finds the teachings on his own and proclaims it. An Arahant is one who follows the teachings and becomes awakened afterwards. So the line in the early texts, one line says that it is impossible that a woman could become a Buddha. Not that they can become Arahants. Women can become Arahants. But this line, which is very debated over and very complicated, is an interesting line. The way I kind of look at it is that the Buddha was talking about in a particular context of culture, of species, and probably understanding that, in times like his, it would probably be impossible for a woman to become a Buddha. And one of the things that, as I've contemplated this a lot, most of the rules that the Buddha put down for monastics are related to the culture at the time, right? They're put into place so that the teachings could actually be created and that they could form and stay alive. And a lot of these things, like, for instance, the 8 Garudhammas, that's one of those things. You're talking about a culture of the time, 2,600 years ago, where, probably a bhikkhuni, a woman being seen as equal to a man in terms of monasticism, would probably not go over too well in the society. And so having these extra rules, which again, some say that they're late, that the Buddha did not put these rules down, and that they're later additions. Some say that he did do that for the culture. And so this is a very complicated topic. There's whole books written on this subject. And actually, I would suggest reading Bhante Analayo's books on about bhikkhunis. He goes into a lot of depths. I've read them myself. So, the way I kind of explain it and the way I think about it is, like, say there's a Buddha that, comes to be and, across the universe and another species. And this species is like spiders, right? Where the males are like the small, weaker versions, and the females are the dominant of the species, right? Would a Buddha be born as a male in that species, or the female? Like the female that has the power, that has the greatest chance of creating the sasana, the teachings, and creating the community that will survive over time and not be basically abandoned by the culture. So I think a lot of it has to do, the Buddha was very keen on cultural understandings and cultural norms. And I think this is also why he allowed for the lighter rules to be abandoned. Because as time and culture changed, then these rules can change. And indeed, that is what's happening with the Garudhammas. See, the interesting thing about the Garudhammas is this. Only some of the Garudhammas actually have a penalty for not following them. Most of them are not technically rules. So what you'll see is, among bhikkhunis, some bhikkhunis follow them very, very strictly, and some of them don't follow them at all. So this is something that is has a wide diversity of views and understandings, the Garudhammas. And the other thing I would say is I have studied both the bhikkhu and the bhikkhuni monastic rules, and I've studied the bhikkhuni rules with bhikkhunis, the very senior bhikkhunis. And most of the rules are shared. When you look at the rules, my perspective was not that, it's not like you shouldn't kind of think of like, oh, well, the women have higher number of rules, so that means misogyny. Because when you look at a lot of the rules, well, a lot of them are specific to women. A lot like to do with like menstruation and different things like that, right? Like that rule wouldn't be for men. You don't kind of see this like that the rules are overly burdensome in an extra way in that regard. At least that's not been my perspective or the perspective of some of the bhikkhunis that I've taught that I've learned from. And some, again, that's not all of them. I'm sure there are some, but most of the rules are shared between the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis, right? They're the same rules no matter which sex. That might be also a good question when Ayasoma comes back next Friday. Ask her about it. See her perspective on it. I know a good amount of her perspective on it, but I'm interested to see how she would answer that. She says that she has experience, as a bhikkhuni going into various places, Mahayana and Theravada. And Western and Eastern. She's experienced some forms of sexism and things like that. And she would probably be better to speak more clearly on that. But in general, it is a big, complicated question with a lot of not easy answers. So Sin has a question. How can one who suffered many bad early life abuses overcome obsessing over all the negative experiences life can offer up? So I guess I'm assuming in this maybe that you have trauma from early life. I'm going to assume from the question possibly that you have worked on that, like you've done some therapy or various, different modalities to try to help you work through all of the trauma of the the abuses in your early life. Like, that's the first step. If that hasn't been done, then that needs to be done. Because this is like obsessing over negative experiences life can offer up. It's a defense mechanism. That's what it is, right? You've been harmed in your most vulnerable state as a child or a young adult. And of course, that's going to make somebody very, very, very apprehensive, very, very wide alert, alert and open towards future abuses or future, malevolence, future vulnerability. That's going to be normal. That's cause and effect. That's those causes and conditions have arisen because of the experiences you had, earlier in life. So going through, therapeutic processes is a large part of allowing you to process that, to come to a better place in life where it's integrated into you and you can move forward, having more trust in people and confidence in that there are good people in the world, and that you don't have to worry about everybody that you meet, puts you in this kind of hyper vigilant obsessing of negative experiences. This is, and also you have to kind of reflect and understand that you're going to have negative experiences. So it might not be a bad idea to think beforehand how you would react to certain situations. Now, of course, in the moment, certain emotions and various things will arise, and sometimes they might be really strong, and you might not be able to have much control when that arises. But it's part of, moving forward in a way that's good for you, right? This is, you kind of being in this prison in a way is what it is. You didn't necessarily choose to go into the prison when you were younger. It was a self-defense mechanism, but now you're still kind of stuck in it, and you're older, and you can, you have choices and possibilities so that you can get out of that prison, so you're not stuck in it for the rest of your life, so that you can live a more happy, content, peaceful life. Right? We have to understand that, everybody, the people who've had trauma when they're a child or not, we have to understand that negative experiences are going to be a part of our existence. And the key is going to be how we choose to live, how we choose to react to these experiences in a skillful way, right? So that we learn from them and we become stronger and better from them. We become more anti-fragile from them, as opposed to becoming fragile and weak and falling apart. That just makes things worse. So in a way, there's also the aspect of, reflecting on, like, do I want to stay in this prison or do I want to get out? And then the next step is figuring out the steps you need to take to get out of the prison. Welcome, Douse. What are the rules for monks for cleaning and caring for the body? How does this relate to lay people? The Buddha, says in various places, like the benefits of brushing your teeth, for example, the benefits of, eating balanced, not overeating, for example. The Buddha, there are these random little suttas where you see Buddha as this kind of like life coach giving you this advice. You know, and of course, like cleaning and caring for the body, this is something that's important for you to do. You know, you need to be able to, and we reflect on that we eat for the nourishment and health of the body, right? And the body needs cleaning. The body needs to eat. The body needs to, do its various processes. The body needs to be cleaned. Now, there's a rule about bathing for the monastics. It started out because the monastics were bathing in the area where the king goes to bathe, and the monastics were bathing too much. They were having too much fun in the water, and the king got agitated and went to the Buddha. The Buddha says, you shouldn't bathe any less than once every 2 or 3 weeks. And then I think it went up to a month, and then it went back down. But and this is not related to like hygiene per se. This is related to, also there was a sect of wanderers at the time of the Buddha who believed that if you bathed yourself 3 times a day, that would lead to awakening, right? So the Buddha was kind of thinking, well, we have to be careful. What's a balanced way of doing things? Let's not bathe every day, but let's bathe at least at intervals that, will be so that the body can be cleaned. And so that's pretty much it. I mean, that's really, I guess, all I would have to say about the rules for monks. I mean, I have other more personal things to say about it, but it doesn't really impact the monastic life or the monastic rules. Light and vision of forms. That's one of those things that is pretty rare, that I feel like I'd want to kind of like look at it in the sutta real quick, just so that I kind of get an understanding of the context. Majjhima Nikaya number 128. All right, so it's in Upakalesa Sutta. Oh, this is Anuruddha Sutta. No, is it? Let's see here. Sir, we meditate diligently, keenly resolute. We perceive both light and vision of forms. But before long, they vanish. We haven't worked out a reason for that. You should work out the reason for that. Let's see. It's not really explained much, is it? Which is probably why you asked me. And I don't know that I can answer that question, to be honest with you. Because there's different parts in the suttas where I talk about, seeing like a light, like for dealing with the hindrances and things like that. But I'm not quite sure about that one. So that might be a better question for Bhante Sudasa when he comes back. He might know. Are you looking it up?
28.
Yeah.
No, I've read it.
Yeah. The Buddha's talking. The Buddha talks about how he was meditating on it and how it went away. So it seems to be it's more about how to deal with all the stuff that happens because when it went away, than the thing itself. It could be a casino thing. I mean, that just popped into my head. It could be something related to the casinos. I'm not sure. Doesn't seem like it's related to like light arose in, like from Dhammacakkappavattana, like wisdom arose in me, light arose in me, like related to his as he became awakened, as the vision and knowledge arose. It doesn't seem like it seems like it's different than that too. So. Jay Kala says to check out Anguttara Nikaya 8.71. All right. Well, thank you, Kala. Maybe you answered the question for me. We have Anagarika Jens here doing reference work. Actually, since I'll let you look it up, so there would be the Book of Eights, 71st Sutta in the Book of Eights. And I'll go to the next question. I'm familiar with being lost in thought and mental proliferation. Is there such a thing as being lost in taste, hearing, sight, sounds, touch, smell? Is there such a thing as proliferation at the sense doors? Sure. What about like the old saying, smelling the roses? It's like I'm just smelling. Or you're like whatever at the boardwalk along the ocean, you're just smelling all the good food. Right? Yeah, of course. All basically what it is what it is getting lost in the attractiveness of the object. And that can happen through all your senses. Maybe you get like, I don't know, whatever, like silk or velour. You say, oh, this feels so neat. You just keep feeling it and, things like that. Of course. The six senses are where we get attached to things because we experience pleasant experiences and we want more of them. And so we get lost in thinking about them and feeling them, experiencing them, wanting to keep experiencing them. The problem is with taste is that taste usually goes really quick, right? When you're eating something, you get like a short dopamine, you get like a short, it's like getting a little drug hit. You get like a short feeling of the great taste of the food, but after a couple of chews, it goes away. So I guess that would be a little bit harder. But you could get lost, like you're eating a meal, like your favorite meal, and the whole time you're just putting it in and you're thinking about it and you're tasting it and all of your senses are engaged, the smell, all of these things. And you're not mindful. You've just totally lost it. You see anything?
What was the number?
8.71.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking if I lost. 71.
That's what Kala says. Hello, Visaka. Welcome. Sin. What is the best and simplest way to learn the suttas? Thank you. I am actually putting together a weekend retreat just on this topic. It's going to be coming out probably the weekend of August 6th and 7th. And there's really no simple way to learn the suttas. It's something that takes some time to get into. What I would say is this: the best way to do it is to listen to monastics read the sutta and then talk about it. I think that's the best way to do it. That's how I did it in the early days. I mean, I could read it, but a lot of times I didn't understand it, and the repetition was kind of annoying to me, and I just didn't really get into it as much. I had to kind of, like consume it in little bits, and I had to consume it with people who were much wiser and understood it better than me so that I could understand the context. And I think that's the important thing with the suttas. Suttas are very, very important to understand what the suttas are. The suttas are a framework for your experience, right? They teach you how to practice, but they also give you a framework for when you're experiencing, when you're going deep in the mind, when you're getting into deep states of concentration and stillness. The suttas are giving you like guideposts, right? They're giving you a framework for what you're going to experience, right? If you don't have that framework and you just start meditating, you can have all kinds of experiences and you will misinterpret them. You will not have you'll get involved, you'll get attached to certain things, and you'll go all over the place, and you'll go way off the path, right? But you read the suttas and you understand the teachings from the suttas, then you say, like, when you get off the path, you're like, oh no, we're way off over here, and we got to keep going that way. And so you can guide yourself back. So the suttas are something that is, without a doubt, has to take time. There's no like thing where like, oh, I understand the suttas now and now I can read them. It takes time. It takes time to acclimate yourself to them. It takes time to understand a lot of the context that's in them. And you do that, I think, by listening to a lot of like YouTube videos, right? When Bhante Sudaso is here, Thursday mornings and Friday mornings, he reads a sutta and he talks about it. Perfect time to do it, and I think they're recorded. So even if you can't catch it live, I have a bunch of recordings of my own, like, going over various suttas. And this is a good way of getting a broader understanding of them and trying to understand them more deeply than you could just by trying to read them directly and getting lost in all of the complicated aspects of it, like the repetition that's going to, put your mind away, or like various translations that might be really old and you're going to not really know what they're talking about, all these kind of things. So that's what I would say. Listen to monks talk about it, read what you can. And if you can't understand it, it's okay. Read something else. Look at another sutta. And then when you get into it, try to read one sutta a day. And so just not overdoing it, not reading too much, just one sutta a day. And that can give your mind a good enough time to try to absorb it. And over years, you'll start to understand and see the benefit of the teachings in the suttas and how impactful they can be and how much truth there is in them. Do you find anything anagarika, Jens? No? All right.
Well, that's, I think, I don't see how it's matched. Reading that one, it just seemed like light was almost a distraction. single, right? And you just let it go. Because it goes into all the, in the Madhyamika, it just goes into terror rose, I mean, like all the things that were interfering. And it was presented as something that was interfering.
Oh, it was presenting as something that was interfering.
And just
Oh.
like that. And that's one of the things that context that's always talks about as well. If something arises, it's like just don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's an extremely common piece of advice across different Buddhist traditions that I've experienced, and across dozens of teachers. Dozens is like when various interesting experiences happen in your meditation, don't get attached to them. They're just arising. Lights, visions, astral deities, whatever arises in your meditation. It's not the object. It's not the point of doing the meditation. It might arise, but just don't get attached to it. Yeah. Metika has a question. Could you please share some words on upekkha and how it differs from indifference and apathy? Well, if we're looking at words, we have to look at words and the context of the words. Indifference in many circles in modern day is seen as like with a negative connotation, but it doesn't necessarily need to have a negative connotation. Apathy is a bit more of a negative connotation, right? Apathy is simply just not necessarily having any desire to do anything in a certain situation. And that apathy is not necessarily connected to wisdom. And let's look at indifference, lack of interest or concern. Right? So somebody can be indifferent as to the state of the world. Right? This is, the Buddha, like the famous statement by Milarepa, the affairs of the world go on forever. Do not neglect your meditation. Right? That sounds like indifference. Right? And for some people, that would sound really horrible. How could you be indifferent to the state of the world? But the Arahants and the Buddha knows what the world is the world. Samsara is samsara. There's no fixing samsara. We can only work to get out of it. And some people would say, that's horrible indifference. How could you consider yourself wise? Or these kind of things. Right? So it's important to understand what the words mean. And then we can talk about upekkha. So apathy is absence or suppression of passion, emotion, or excitement. Again, doesn't necessarily need to have a negative connotation, but in some circles it has a negative connotation. Now, I would say in terms of any Buddhist qualities, apathy would not fit in there. Right? The Buddha actually teaches us to have practice, build up zeal for the practice, right? To practice strongly, to keep, to being apathetic, that wouldn't be really conducive to the practice. Indifference, one way or the other, it could be. So now let's go over upekkha. Upekkha here, equanimity is what it's translated as. Upekkha is all about developing a mind or having a mind state that is not running after likes and dislikes. It's equanimous, right? It's a mind that is, whatever is happening, unpleasant experience happens, you're not running away from it. Pleasant experience happens, you're not attaching to it. Your mind is simply like a still forest pool. Like it's just like clear, calm water. If you're attaching to something or being averse to something, the water's getting all churned up. When you have an equanimous mind, a calm, still mind, then you actually can see things as they are better. In the fourth jhana, which is the pinnacle of being able to see things as they are in samadhi, there's nothing but equanimity and mindfulness. So equanimity is extremely important for being able to see things as they are. If you have a mind that is running around with our likes and our dislikes, then our mind cannot really see things clearly because our mind is clouded. Our mind is busy and clouded and wrapped up in the affairs of the mind. This is what the mind does. You observe the mind. You sit down to follow your breath. Within 2 minutes, it's run away from something and run towards something. That's the nature of the mind. So upekkha is this equanimous mind. And when you have upekkha in relation to, say, the other three Brahma Viharas, metta, karuna, and mudita, right? Upekkha is in there as one of the four Brahma Viharas. It's the seventh of the 7 factors of awakening. So this is a very important mental aspect. So upekkha is, again, something that works with and supports metta, right? Metta is supposed to be not just for some people and not for others, but for all beings. Karuna, also the same. Compassion is supposed to be practiced for all beings equally. It's not we have compassion for these people and we don't have compassion for these people. These people are the oppressed. These people are the oppressors. We don't care what we do to the oppressors. They deserve it, right? That's not upekkha, right? That's not mudita. That's not karuna, and that's not metta, right? All of these qualities are qualities that are transcendent, that are not based on who we like and who we dislike. So upekkha allows us to, along with having a mind of friendliness for all beings, having a mind of compassion for all beings in their situation, both at the mundane level of whatever suffering they might be having in the world, and at the transcendent level of the fact that they're a being in samsaric state just like you. So basically stuck in hell, basically, for lack of a better word, stuck in the samsaric journey. And then with that mind state, then you can know what is best for yourself, know what is best for others, right? And then you can act on that. What is indifferent? What is apathy? What you should do? What you shouldn't do? All these kind of things. These are ideas. These are personality views in the world, and people will see things differently. But if you have upekkha and the Brahma Viharas, and you have sati, then whatever you do will be for your benefit and the benefit of others. Kala has a question on robes. Are the robes in the Ajahn Chah lineage different from the standard ones? They seem to have sleeves or be made of different material. What are the types of robes? Depends on what you mean by type. I don't think they're different. Different materials make different robes. there's materials. Robes can be made out of wool, linen, cotton. Robes are synthetic. Robes can be various colors. There's not really colors that have to be, but there's colors that shouldn't be on robes. I don't know about sleeves. Now, I think what you might be seeing possibly is how different countries in different traditions fold their robes. That could be the case. There's a variety of that. I mean, I've learned maybe about 6 or 7 different ways of folding my robes between Sri Lankan, Thai, and Burmese. So that might be more what you're seeing. But essentially, robes are bed sheets, right? They're flat rectangles. And how you can wear and fold those robes, there's a pretty large number of different ways. And of course, if you're ordained into a very traditional sect, then all those different ways don't matter, because you wear the robe how you're taught to wear it and how the rest of your tradition wears it and things like that. Jay Kala is explaining more, I guess, about that the light thing, talking about the divine eye and related to devas and things like that. Okay. Lee, could you talk further about seeing light in relation to the hindrances? So this is one of the ways that the Buddha gives Mahamoggallana to counteract sloth and torpor. Like, in addition to, going like this with your ears, like pulling your ears, holding your breath, like trying to imagine a really bright light in your eyes. That's all that means. It's nothing fancy or special. It's just a technique that the Buddha gives as a possible way to subdue your sloth and torpor. Richard has a question. It's about Zen, so I don't know if my answer would be good, but I read a quote from a Zen book years ago. I still practice. The quote is, "The mind not touching things, the steps not placed anywhere. At the time, I thought it meant enlightenment. Am I mistaken?" I couldn't, coming from a sutta perspective, what I would say is that I think that temporarily, the mind could not touch things and the steps could not be placed anywhere. For somebody who's not awakened, temporarily. But permanently only for an arahant, only for an awakened being. Jay Kyle has a question. Sometimes when watching the breath, I start to feel that I am watching my own mind watch the breath. What's the best way to go about this? That's fine. Sounds like you switched to some satipatthana, some chitta nupassana, right? Observing the mind. No problem. What I would say is, if you are trying to practice anapanasati, then try to bring your awareness to something physical, right? Like the feeling of the air going in and out of the nostrils, the rise and fall of the breath of the chest, right? Try to anchor yourself back on something physical and focus on that. And that should bring you back to the experience as opposed to observing the mind having observing the experience. Oh, chat jumped a bit here. All right. So Rick has a good question. I have been putting together an emergency preparedness kit as recommended. However, I have noticed that my mind become unsettled asking how much is enough. I also notice urges to hoard for an imagined possible disaster. Ajahn, can you share some reflections on being prepared without becoming obsessed? So actually, I have some reflections on this because I was this. For years, I fancied myself a survivalist, and I learned how to survive in the woods and, do things like start fires without using, like lighters and stuff like that. So I understand this mindset, and actually, it's a good mindset when done balanced, right? Because the average person takes society so for granted that they can't imagine things breaking down, but it can, right? You have a hurricane, like even in New Jersey during Hurricane Sandy and the 2 years before that, people went days or even weeks without electricity in their house, right? People had to get generators and people this and the various like emergency preparedness, organizations say to have at least 3 days worth of food and rations, or to have a go bag, like a bag, that, to ready so that in case you need to run, get out real quickly. Like in the West, this is something that's really important because like in California, one day you're fine, and then 5 hours later there's a fire and you have to get out, and you can't just like say, oh, I'm good, well maybe what should I take, no, you need to get out within like an hour and your house might be ashes in 2, right? So this is something that it's good, it's good to be prepared for. But what I would say, and it's not really a Buddhist thing, I guess, what I would say is the most important thing is knowledge. Like you probably never will have enough. Like, the people who like, make bunkers and hoard just in case the end of the world comes. But in all honesty, how many people are you going to stop from coming and taking all your stuff? What if there's hundreds of them? And even still, what if you do have enough food to last you for a while, but then, well, what happens after that, right? Like I would say like the most valuable thing is knowledge as opposed to hoarding things. So hoard knowledge. Maybe that might be better. And then, just accept that probably whatever you have is not going to be enough, but is it enough for now? Is it enough for the best I can do so that I can have some kind of buffer, some kind of peace, but not be fretting over it for the rest of my life? Do I have enough? Do I have enough? That's the mind of fear that's always going like, am I going to survive this? Is this enough? And that's why people hoard. But best thing to do, I think, is to hoard your knowledge. That's the best thing. Link to Sutta Retreat. I don't have it up yet, but the best thing to do is to go to my website and sign up for it. Like put your email in the box to the right. And then when I announce it, you'll see it. Muggaseka.org. Yeah. All right. So I said it right. Spotted lanternflies are starting to spread in New Jersey. I've been told not to kill any I see. I don't want to kill, but I understand they can be very destructive. What are your thoughts? It's up. The Buddha does not approve of killing. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. So you have to think about what's right for you. As I always say, there's very little black and white in samsara. There's lots of gray, meaning that everything situation that you might be put in, it's not going to be an easy thing. You might have to contemplate and really think about it before you act. And sometimes, samsara often is a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation that you're not going to get off, you're not getting out of this life clean. So it's up to you. I would probably not kill, regardless of what it would do. I don't think I personally would kill, because that would be following the teachings to the best of my ability. I don't know what lantern is that what it may be what I used to call it. We used to call in Jersey fireflies, like the flies that glow at night. Maybe spotted lanternflies is a different species that's invasive. I don't know. Douse coming in with great one-liners. One sutta a day keeps the Mara away. Very good. Oh, Rick. So Rick is saying that how he has been a mountain man in the Rockies. Sounds like if I didn't become a monk, that's exactly what I would have wanted to do. As a matter of fact, the Colorado Rockies are where I'm looking to eventually start my own monastery and be a mountain monk. So hopefully that will work out. But yeah, I understand. I think we have very similar mind states. But yeah. The not enough is not enough mind state. That's very deep. It's much more than like thinking about a survival situation. It's about a lot of different things. Do I have enough money? Do I need more money to support my family better? Do I need more this? Do I need more that? That's a very deep mind state, hard to understand, hard to see. But when you investigate and you observe it, you can use that as an object of meditation. Really try to understand it deeply and try to think of different ways that you can counteract that. Like when your mind says, oh, this isn't enough, we'll say, well, I've taken these steps and this is where I've gone. And I think this really is enough. Like, it's okay. Counteract your mind. Counteract that mind state. Especially if a part of your mind thinks, you know what? No, this is enough. We're okay. Because it will never be enough. Right? The Buddha, Mara comes to the Buddha, and Mara is telling the Buddha about, oh, you could do so many things. You could rule over the world. You could turn this mountain. You can turn Mount Meru into gold. And the Buddha says, even if a being had 2 mountains of gold, it would not be enough. Right? The Buddha is pointing towards that this is a never-ending mind state. at some point you have to say, you have to counteract it and say, this is enough. Boa notte, or is that buona notte? Da Milano, Italy. Grazie. All right. So, looks like we have reached the end of questions. We still have some time left. So I'll wait a couple minutes if any other questions arise, and if not, then we'll call it a night. Rick has a question. What precepts does overspending break? It feels like stealing from myself. I wouldn't say that it breaks a precept, right? You can do what you're doing completely without breaking precepts, but it can still be unskillful. The precepts are just like the very, very basic of virtue. And I would say that your situation, Rick, with your hoarding and survival fears are more related to hindrances than precepts, more related to craving and fear than precepts. So I wouldn't think, if the thought that it feels like I'm stealing from myself, what you're stealing from yourself is peace of mind. That's what you're stealing from yourself. Because your mind is overly, hyperly focused on preparing. Right? Every general, right? Every general has to prepare for a battle. But then what do they know? Maybe you know that what the first rule of warfare, as they say, right? Even the best plan does not survive first contact with the enemy, right? You prepare and you prepare, but then you understand, well, actually, I have to be able to adapt, because whatever planning I'm doing, it might be good, but it might just fall apart, and then I have to adapt, right? So, it's a tough thing. I don't know. I hope what I've given you can be beneficial for at least observing and understanding it. But you're stealing your own peace of mind. That's what you're stealing. That's not against the precepts. That's just harmful to yourself. Kala says, speaking of survival in nature, are monks allowed to make fires and things, or does it count as hurting plants? The fire thing with monks is very interesting, because we do have a rule that says that monks aren't allowed to start fires. However, we also have another rule that we're supposed to know how to do fires. Right? And so I've actually pondered writing an article about this, the curious case of fire and monastics. because it's, like the Buddha says in the Kandakas, that the monks are supposed to be able to know how to navigate by the stars, how to start and maintain fires, right? All these kind of skills that somebody would need when they're being wilderness monks. The story for the Pachitya, I think it's a Pachitya, that that monks aren't allowed to start fires, is related to they start a fire in the hollow of a tree where devas are, right? Or where beings are. So you see this in the suttas, like somebody does something specifically stupid, and then the Buddha makes a rule that's a bit overdoing it, right? Like the rule could have been, well, be careful where you start fires, foolish men, which would make more sense in connection to the other rules related to, yeah, you should know how to start a fire and maintain a fire. It's an interesting thing. I mean, like at Bhavana, when we would do fires, oftentimes once I became a monk, what would happen was I would set the fire up because I knew how to do fires. I've started and managed hundreds of campfires in my day. And so I would be like, well, since I'm a monk, technically, oh, but there's a layperson here. I'll set it up, you light it, and then I'll just maintain it. Right? So it's kind of like, it's kind of skirting the rule, but on the other hand, it's kind of also in line with the other rule. Nobody ever said that the monks' rules are not complicated. It's quite interesting, to say the least. Any recommended suttas for dealing with chronic illness? Nothing comes to mind like that is specifically dealing with chronic illness. I think one of the best suttas for that is the Salla Sutta, the simile of the arrow. I think reflecting on that sutta is probably a good sutta related to dealing with chronic illness. Salla Sutta, simile of the arrow. Because that does deal with like, physical pain and how what our underlying our habitual reactions to it is and stuff like that. Other than that, I would look up, I would Google Bhikkhu Bodhi related to chronic illness, because he has a chronic illness and he's given a few talks about it. Ideally, when somebody has something that's chronic, in a way, it's kind of like they're given a specific avenue of investigation for their own path. Like in some ways, like that becomes your path. It becomes your object of investigation. Investigating that becomes the avenue through which you gain insight. So it's like, I used to have this motto, for me, the motto was to turn my greatest weakness into my greatest strength, right? And so it's kind of like along that line, right? You think, oh, this chronic illness is going to be an impediment to my development of the path, but it could just be the vehicle for the development of the path. It's an important thing to reflect on. Scott says, Bhante, have you been threatened during your work? How did you deal with this? I assume you meant when my career doing child protective services. Never directly. So I think it's because of how I went into the situations to begin with. So the way I kind of went into the situations that I had to deal with in my work doing child protective services was I did it in such a way that didn't come off as confrontational, didn't come off as personally judgmental. I went into a situation, even when I was an investigator, I went into a situation as these are the allegations that have come in. My job is just to investigate them. I don't know if they're true or not. Like, so like I would come into somebody's house in such a way that it did not raise their defenses, in such a way that was honest and sincere. Like, for instance, one of the things that I did that no other worker did, and when supervisors told me this, they told me not to do it, but I did it anyway. Because I was, because of my political leanings, being a libertarian type, being very about like freedom and people's rights and things like that. One of the things that I would tell people that is technically according to law was that you don't have to let me in your house. Hey, my name is Joe. I'm from the state. Allegations have come in. I need to investigate those allegations as per state law. Could I come in? Your rights are you don't have to let me in the house. I would have to come back with some kind of court order, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the time, I think only one time in my whole career did somebody say, come back with a court order. And I did. I came back with the court order. But most of the time, people were like, oh, okay. And they come in. And, like starting out in that way significantly reduced any danger that I was ever in. Like, I can remember I had multiple times I had clients who were the leaders of gangs. One client, the police wouldn't let me go to the house without them as an escort. And I remember I went and I sat down and I was talking to the guy. He's a young guy, maybe like, I was maybe mid-30s. He was maybe 30. And I'm talking to him and the police are right there. And I was like, this is not working out. Like, I told the officer, I said, officer's good. I'm good. I'm fine. No problem. Go. And they kind of were hesitant, but they went. And then I just talked to the guy. I mean, yeah, was he packing somewhere? He probably was. Could he have killed me? He probably could have. But I was able to engage with the people in such a way. And also I was practicing lots of metta. I was a Buddhist and I was practicing metta. And I also came from things even before I was a Buddhist, I developed in my mind that whoever I engage with, they could be some weird person. Like, even today, like, people was like, I'm non-binary, such and such, and this and all these things. And I'm like, well, what the heck does that even mean? And like, I'm confused about it. And this seems weird, but it doesn't matter who they are. What matters is that they're human. That's first. And so I've developed that, that mindset of I'm dealing with a human being. So they're the leader of a gang. Okay, they're a human being first, right? So I sat across somebody who, sexually assaulted their granddaughter, 7-year-old granddaughter. Yeah, that's a pretty rough thing, but he's a human being first, right? So I had that basis of I'm dealing with a human being. I'm de-escalating the situation. I'm not creating a defensive mechanisms to arise. And because of that, even though I entered hundreds of homes, and yeah, I could have died. I never did. I never felt threatened. in any of the homes I ever went into. I think it's because it's how you present yourself, how you go into the situation, and how you always want to de-escalate. If you do that, then you will come out good. And if you have practiced lots of metta, that will also be a good thing. If I was ever threatened, I would have got out of the house. That's the first thing you do. Get out of the house. You go into every time you go in a house, you see where the exits are. Your situational awareness is up. You don't put your back to anything that somebody can come behind you, and you keep an eye on the exit. And if you need to get out, you get out. But I never had to do that. All right. Let's see. Lee says, can you list evening allowables for monastics and those on 8 precepts? What is the significance of allowing certain foods but not others? Why is butter allowed but not dairy or milk? So these are very debated and complicated. But basically, so what happened is this. The monks were eating their 1 meal a day, or maybe 2 meals. And maybe, during famines and times, because you see in the sutta, you see in the Vinaya that there's times of famine. And the monks become very, very skinny and weak and malnourished. And so the Buddha allowed tonics. And these tonics are, as you say, butter, ghee, sugar, molasses, honey. And so basically anything that is allowable from those 5. So basically a monk could have as allowable anything that's just pure sugar candy, which obviously is not healthy for you. A monk could technically also have dark chocolate, giving allowables. People give dark chocolate to monastics all the time because there's no milk in it. And the cacao, the beans, the leaf, these would be considered even a medicine. And so certain things are under medicine can also be considered allowable. So that's the basis for how all of these things are allowable. And then they're expanded from there. So for instance, a big one is cheese, right? Some traditions, like cheese is not allowable. And other traditions say, well, because cheese is made from such and such, and it's from this and this and this, it's allowable. Right? And you'll see in Burma doesn't even allow tea after the meal at noon, because they interpret the Vinaya as not even allowing tea. So there's a wide diversity of what's considered allowable. And this is meant to be not like a second meal, but like a little evening snack. Like for instance, what I do, I follow what I guess is the Mahabua tradition way. It's the Thai way of I eat 1 meal a day, and then in the evening I have some cheese and some chocolate or some something else that's allowable, like anything kind of like fruit juice that doesn't have pulp is allowable. Like Italian ices, like frozen, anything that's just like frozen juice is allowable. So you have a few things like that for blood sugar and for a little, for something at night. And then I go the extra step of, I also do intermittent fasting at the modern version of it, whereas from 7 p.m. to 11 a.m. the next day, I have nothing but water. And that really gets the metabolism going, and it's good for your health. So that's kind of what I do. And basically, Forest Dhamma, which is Ajahn Dik, who's a direct disciple of Mahabua, they do that same, very similar setup. They'll have their 1 meal a day, and then 7, 8 o'clock, they'll have some cheese, gummy bears, stuff like that, chocolates, allowables. So that's usually how that works. All right, friends. So we have some friends from Australia. Good day, Eve. Welcome. All right, friends. But we are at 9:00 here in East Coast America. We are at the end of questions, so I think we'll call it a night. All right, friends. That is the end of Monk Chat. So keep an eye out for our continued streams. Bante, Sudaso, and Ayasoma will be back. The next Monk Chat will probably be 3 or 4 monks, which will be good. So it won't just be me. You'll have a good diversity of opinions and insight to have your questions answered by. And so and I will be here for the Vasa, so I'll be here on and off on the streams. But once Bante and Aya are back, I'm off duty a little bit, or at least put on the schedule. So until next time, may yours have a spiritually successful and peaceful practice. Sukhi Hotu, may you be happy. Have a good weekend.